Is it too early to punt roto categories? Is it too early to cut bait on your fantasy stars? Is it too early to splurge in fab? Is it too early to ignore preseason projections? We'll answer these and other is it too early questions on this week's show. Plus, we'll have waiver wire, pitcher preview, and injuries with Ruvain. SiriusXM's Glenn Colton joins us next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, other than my softball game the other day. I pitched a great game. We were down 3-2, bottom of the seventh. We had the bases loaded and one out, and I come up to bat and I hit into a double play. Game over. Oh,
that sounds like the Mets. I mean, are you trying to replicate them? I mean, what are you trying to do there?
Well, we scored 2 runs. That's more than the Mets have done in typical games lately. So, what a shame. How's your week?
Week's going fine. I'm enjoying watching baseball with the weather getting nicer and hopefully with things heating up. Hopefully power will be heating up. I want to see more home runs. I know everyone wants to see more home runs. I want to see more offense. I want to see how the pitch clock plays in this new era of baseball throughout the heart of the summer.
Yep, it's getting later in the season, and it's our Is It Too Early episode. We've got a fantastic guest today. You might know him. He's been on the show before. Welcome back to the show, Glenn Colton. How are you, Glenn?
Doing well. Always a pleasure to join you guys. Appreciate the invite. Ariel, I have to ask you a question before this gets started.
Sure.
You come up with the bases loaded in a one-run game. Did you swing at the first pitch?
No, I did not.
Good.
Yeah, the count
I'll
was,
stay on the show, because if you said
yes.
you did, I would have been like, okay, guys, I got to go.
No, I took a strike, 2 balls, fouled off one, and then grounder to third. The guy, about a 2-bouncer, he had to hurry up, and he threw, I think, I was told, he threw from his knees across the diamond and got me by 2 steps. So, but no, I did not swing at the first pitch.
Good.
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to jump right into it, as we usually do, in our strategy section. We'll get to Is It Too Early a little bit later, but I just want to get your take, Glenn. And, it's been over a month, couple of weeks already into the season. And first of all, just your take on what you did going into the season in terms of draft strategy or draft plans. What did you do this year that was maybe a change from what you focused on in prior years, if any?
Yeah, I don't think we Rick Wolf and I, Colton the Wolfman, we do all these industry leagues together. So we stick to our smart system. We stick to our rules of engagement. But the one thing we did a little bit differently this year is we put even more emphasis, especially in the auction leagues, on offense. Pitching is so hard to predict, and the injuries are so substantial, which has certainly borne itself out this year, that we just wanted to lock down, a really good offensive team, and that's what we even paid more attention to that. Most of the $260 auction budgets, we were $200 on offense and just $60 on pitching.
That's so funny. And you play mostly in the mono leagues, I think.
Do we do both?
We do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for mono leagues, offense dominates a little bit more than it does in a mixed league. My strategy going into this year is actually almost the opposite. Is I focus more on pitching. The waiver wire I find in recent years has been so barren for starters, and I don't want to stream starters. I just don't. And one of the plans this year was to really just go with either more starters being drafted in the auction, or I'm just going to go with relievers, middle relievers, guys who get saves, even guys who don't, guys who will vulture wins. I think that's a better strategy in terms of getting the pitching going. I found not a lot of success with streaming pitchers in the past couple of years. What about you, Ruvain?
I think we tried. Oh, so one of the things that we tried to implement is to stay away from having too many injury-prone guys or guys who are injured in the off-season, not ready to play to begin with when the season starts. Because if you have too many injury guys to begin with, there's so many injuries during the course of the season. You're falling so far behind the eight ball in counting stats that it's so hard to be able to catch back up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Stay away from guys who you know are injured already, because there's plenty that are going to get injured. Glenn, have you found that focusing on the offense has helped you so far this year?
It absolutely has because we're doing very well. We're in contention in pretty much all the leagues we are in. We're currently in first place in Labor AL, which has been a lot of fun.
Nice.
And it's we're going for ring number 6 in that one, so that would be exciting. One for the other hand. But I think that what you guys were saying about not getting that fifth starter on a bad team, not streaming, by not spending a lot of money on pitching, we actually do have that strong setup guy instead of another starter, and the setup guys invariably cost very little draft capital, and those guys get wins, they get strikeouts, and even a guy like Matt Moore, for example, who I really liked as a last guy to pick on a draft, coming in, getting 2-3 Ks, winning a game, every week it seems, that's worked out.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Going shorter on the pitching, and I've seen you do this before. Is you go for those middle relievers or potential closers even, and that definitely has worked out. For me, I spent more money on the, let's call it an SP3-4 range, the Drew Rasmussen, Pablo Lopez, Jeffrey Springs, which was working out for a short time. Spent an extra pitcher. So if we're talking like a $10, $15 pitcher, got an extra one. So we've spent that pick in offense to go to pitching.
Also drafting the middle reliever, we had a lot of shares of Andres Munoz. We have a lot of shares. I know on the waiver wire, Duran. We have a bunch. Even if they're just a possible share in the closing, there you have a lot of great counting stats, a lot of great ratios there. The strikeout ratio is great. So, if you don't want to, jump off the deep end with those number 5 starters, you throw those other guys and they stabilize your ERA and WHIP. And if you throw those guys out even now and your ERA and WHIP is toward the bottom, they can help stabilize so you can throw those 2-star pitchers later on.
Right. So we've come a couple of weeks into the season, and it always begs us to ask the question, is it too early to do things? Is it too early to give up? Is it too early to punt certain things? So I want to spend today's episode for the listening audience here and just talking about hey, is it too early to do this, and get our take on when is the right time, or maybe it is already the right time on things. So let's start it off, Glenn. First question for you. Is it too early to give up on winning if you're currently last place in your league?
It is too early with one exception, and that is if you are playing in a dynasty league or a keeper league and you have the opportunity to change your next 3 to 5 years by moving early off of winning this year. But other than that, if you're in a redraft league or, a league that anything other than keeper dynasty, it is just too early. I have certainly been in situations where we have been in 10th, 11th place at this stage and have won leagues, and we've seen people rise through the standings and overtake us when we were winning and somebody else was way down in the standings. It's maybe less than 25% of the season is in the books. There's a lot of baseball to be played.
Ruvain, do you agree?
I think it depends on the type of roster that you have. If your roster is all injured and you're hoping them to come back, and then when they come back they're able to produce, then it's not too late. But if you have guys who are already gone for the season, you have no chance of getting them back, and you don't have the guys on your roster to make up in the counting stats that you have, then yes, it may be too late. Ratio stats, don't worry too much with ratio stats. The ERA, WHIP, you can make those up. Batting average, you can actually make those up over the course of the season, because usually in baseball averages even out. So you can make that stuff up, but if you're behind in the counting stats and you guys are injured and are not coming back, you may be a little bit too late if you're in dead last.
Yeah, I agree with Glenn on this one. I think it is way too early. If you are in a keeper dynasty league, then maybe your focus should be, okay, am I going to play for this year or for the other years? And you might want to make that decision a little bit sooner. Glenn, when do you think it is the time when you say, all right, I'm in last place? It's probably not going to happen this year. Is it June? Is it July? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably, you have to really start seriously doing that thought process right around Memorial Day, but it's probably not till sometime around the middle of June. But again, if it's a redraft league and you think you're not going to win, well, you know what? Roto leagues and head-to-head leagues, they require you, in the whole integrity of the league requires you to do your best. So then you just set a new goal. In a 12-team league, if you're in 12th, say, I'm going to get to 6th. I'm going to get to the top half. Like, I can't win, but I can move up. And I play in a couple of leagues, one of them the FSGA Champions League, where there is relegation. So if you come in the bottom 2, you're relegated out of the Champions League. So nobody kicks it in.
Right. No, that's a great rule for leagues. I think the June 5th is probably around the time where realistically, if you're in a redraft, if you're in last place, it's probably not going to happen. But under no circumstance should you quit. It's your responsibility to the others in your league to really play fairly. Now, should you spend hours and hours on fab each week? I can't tell you to do that, but if you have an injured player, replace him. If you line up set every week the right way, don't do that to your league mates. But what about punting certain specific rotisserie categories? If you're in Roto, Glenn, do you think it's too early to say, you know what, I've got like 5 saves, the next person has 12 saves, maybe I should punt that? Or maybe ratios, if you've blown up your ratios in pitching, you've got a 7 ERA, do you say, listen, I'm just the Oakland Athletics and I'm just going to live here. I'm not going to gain many points. Let me just focus elsewhere and do something else. Do you think it's too early to give up on certain specific rotisserie categories?
Yeah, I still think it is too early at this stage. You say, okay, I only have 5 saves or whatever, but then things happen. Every day something happens. All of a sudden, Jose Alvarado is now hurt, and I think Craig Kimbrell is going to get saves, right? And all of a sudden, Liam Hendricks, and so great that he's back, pitching, is all of a sudden maybe on the wire in some certain leagues. There are so many teams with bad closing situations, some of which we'll talk about in our waiver wire section later. But I think it's way too early to give up now. Again, you get to middle of June and you see, okay, I can give up, let's say my ratios are bad, I'm just going to load starters to try to win wins and strikeouts. I mean, okay, but too early right now.
So I used to actually think that it was about the right time in Roto leagues to say that. If you've blown your ratios, just start streaming all the pitchers, 2-start pitchers, load up on Ks, you'll get more wins. That's only given if you have closers. So Ruben and I were once in an NFBC league where we had just absolutely terrible ratios, and then I think we had Noah Syndergaard. We had a couple of good starters, and they were out at a commission. But we did have good closers, so we were going to finish relatively high in saves. So we said, you know what? How do we maximize our pitching points? I think it's just to ignore the ratios for now. Just focus on volume. Just, load up on starters. And actually, we made it and we finished in second place in the league because we made that determination now. However, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that when you're looking for wins in your fantasy league, pitchers are pitching less and less past the 5th inning. Like 2-star pitchers used to be, oh, wow, I've got 2 shots to win. That's not the case anymore. Starters 5th starters on teams who are available on your waiver wire pool might only go 4 2/3. Like, look at Johnny Brito. He couldn't make it to 5 innings against the Oakland Athletics with the lead. I had him in one league. He's not going to get a win, even though he's against the A's. There are fewer starters that can do that. So the effect of doing the 2-star pitchers in volume to get your wins, not as great. And the same thing with strikeouts, because they're not in that many long. They're not giving you the volume that they used to. So to abandon the ratios and say, I'm just going to make it up with pure volume, I don't think is a viable strategy anymore in today's baseball environment, although I did it one time. Do you agree, Reuven?
No, I think you can do that, but I think it's too early to do that. The only category at this point and this early in the season, we're only 6 weeks into the season, 7 weeks in. I think the only category you can think about punting is saves because if you drafted the wrong closers and you're really bottom, it's going to be very hard to catch up because the way bullpens are today, there's so many pitchers vulturing saves that it's hard to pick the right guy. And are you going to spend all your fab on that, or are you going to spend your fab elsewhere? I don't know if anyone wants to spend all their fab on relievers to try to catch up in just one category. So it may still be better to go after those two-star pitchers, but not yet. I think the guys right now, even if you're not going to get the wins, even Johnny Brito against the A's didn't get the win, but he's still a guy who has a chance of getting a win, and that's better than some guys you may have on your team right now.
Well, what about steals, Ruvain? Can you punt steals if you're very low? I don't know.
No.
You gotta no.
No. I think in today's day and age, the way steals have gone up, I think steals are going to be easier to get. I think they're going to be especially when you're going to have more injuries, younger players will come up, and when they come up, they're usually faster and they usually steal more. But what you should look for is look for the teams that are stealing the most. Look at the Pirates. Look at the teams that run a lot. And those are the guys. Those are the guys who are when they bring guys up, target those guys because you may get a nice area of stolen bases from those guys.
Do you agree, Glenn?
I totally agree. And I think, look at the people who said, all right, I came out of my draft or my auction with a team that's lacking in steals. And that actually happened to us in the NFBC main event. And the first thing we did was jump in early on J1 Bay. And that changed the tenor of the team completely because you can find those guys. Sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes the Bryce Tarangs don't run crazy or whatever. But you look at a guy like Bay and then a guy like Michael Franco, who had, something like 39 steals in the, not Michael Franco, Michael Garcia, excuse me, 39 steals in the minor leagues. And you can find that. I agree with Ruvain. The steals are going to be there.
Right. What about the playing for volume? And I don't know if you do this, Glenn. Do you sometimes just say, all right, let's pick some two-start pitchers to get some extra Ks and wins? And if you do that, is it too early to start doing that right now in the season?
So I only do that if I like either I like the pitcher or I like both matchups. But you get a guy who's, pitching at Oakland but at Colorado or at Toronto, unless I love the pitcher stuff or somebody who came up or has a new pitch or something that says to me there's a reason to believe there's going to be success, I stay away from those bad two-start starters, the Jordan Lyles of the world these days. I think they do more damage than they do good.
Yeah, I agree. I've made it my mission not to do that this year as I had in the past, and so far it's working out as far as the ratios. I've got pretty good ratios in every single league I play in, other than GDD.
But that's I was about to say that in GDD, I was dead last in ERA and WHIP after I think 3 or 4 weeks in the season. I just threw out my middle relievers. I'm lacking in wins now, but now I'm middle of the pack to close to the top of the pack in ERA and WHIP. So you can make up those ratios if you decide to go after those two-star pitchers this early on. I wouldn't go after those two-star pitchers this early on because I don't think I think it's spending your fab the wrong way. You're going to spending so much fab now on these two-star pitchers. Instead, look a week ahead or 2 weeks ahead, and who's going to be the two-star pitcher in 2 weeks. Get that future two-star pitcher now, so because they're cheaper, much cheaper now than they would be, let's say, August or September, those future two-star pitchers. So if you're going to do that, don't look at this week. Look at next week and see if you can pick and choose because people aren't looking 2 weeks ahead. If you can steal the diamond in the rough from 2 weeks from now and get them for $2 now instead of spending, in a $100 budget, get $2 now instead of $8 next week, I think that's the way to go.
All right, so let's talk about projections. And, the listeners on this show know that we're very big into looking at projections. A lot of our computations for a player's worth is, in part, initially, I'd say, at least based on projections. We can change our minds afterwards, but our base of numbers always starts from projections. Glenn, I know that you do look at projections, even if they're not entirely, your values aren't entirely based on that. Do you think it is too early to stop looking at preseason projections? Or let me broaden the question. Do you think it is too early to disregard what you thought of a player preseason right now?
So, yes, it's too early to disregard what you thought, and yes, it is too early to disregard preseason projections. Whatever weight you put on the preseason projections, it is still one input. I'm not a guy who's ever said, all right, I'm going to, as much as I love ATC and the Bat X and some others, I look at that. I want to know what the projection system says, but it's just one data point in my overall analysis of a player. And it is still just one data point. It hasn't really changed the weighting of it because I want to know, especially when guys get cut, right? And all of a sudden a name that you're surprised is on your waiver wire. You know what? Go back and look at the preseason projections, and then you try to say, why is this guy not reaching these projections? Was there an injury? Was there some, odd BABIP? Was there some unexplained inability to hit lefties or curveballs or whatever it may be? And I think that the preseason projections help you identify underpriced players on the waiver wire and underpriced players on the trade market.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is too early to disregard all of your draft prep only in May. Sure, what 2023 has, shown so far definitely counts for something. And, the year-to-date the rest of season projections, I should say, do incorporate some of the current data, right? I mean, take Steamer, for example. The way Steamer works is it looks at all of the past data points. Here's what happened in 2023, here's what happened in 2022, and so on and so forth. It gives it sort of like a time delay or latency. Stuff that happened recently counts more in terms of a player's outcome than stuff that happened earlier, but it does count. So, what happened the last month does count. It receives some weight, probably more weight than any data point in 2022, but still, you have prior years projections that do count more than just the 2023 year-to-date figures. Ruvain, do you agree? Is it too early to stop looking at the preseason valuations of players?
I agree, and I think we should all be looking at the 2023 projections for prospects when they're coming up and pump the brakes a little bit when these top prospects come up because we're spending a boatload of fab on these guys. And if you look at the preseason projections, if you saw the preseason projections, you wouldn't be spending that much money on it. So, yes, you can continue to look at it. There are some cases when you could, I think, throw it out the window, the projections in some cases, but I think especially when it comes to the prospects, keep an eye on it and do your due diligence when you put in a huge fab bid.
Yeah, Glenn, we talked on last week's show about these ginormous fab bids that people are giving for these prospects. $300, $400 out of 1,000. What's your take on that? Do you think that these very expensive bids, I know that if you want them, you gotta pay the price. But, these Mason Millers that who knows if they're injured, who knows if they'll actually succeed. Do you think they're worth those enormous price tags that you have to pay to get them?
I think it really depends on your team context. If you're a team that was completely relying on, Brandon Woodruff or Jacob deGrom, and all of a sudden Bryce Miller is there, you may really need to pay more. But the other thing is, remember that when you're buying 5 months of stats, that's worth more than buying 2 months of stats. So you have to wait the beginning of the season a little bit heavier as well. And, if you are thinking when you pick up a Bryce Miller or a Mason Miller before he got hurt, that you're going to get 160 innings the rest of the way, well, then you're not thinking about it the right way. Think about it. They're going to put limits on these kids. And what is he worth at 100 good innings? And I think that's, the way to think about it. But I have no problem taking a couple of shots at home runs on either big-time strikeout pitchers, big-time speed guys. I have no problem doing that. You just have to do it smartly.
Do you think, Glenn, it is too early to believe in the 2023 year-to-date figures? So, Patrick Wisdom has gone off the charts and clobbered homers. Things like that. Is it too early to just completely say, wow, this guy has done it so successfully so far, something has to have changed with him, believe in him?
So yes, it's too early to come to the conclusion that it has to be. So you have to go and look for the why is it? If I haven't looked at Patrick Wisdom's stats, but he's a guy who has bad contact rates historically, bad strikeout rates, Has there been a change in his ability to make contact or consistent contact? Is his home run to fly ball like 60% so that there's some oddball number? I'm making that up, of course. So I think you have to look at it and say, I need to figure out, is this real or is this noise? And I think you have to take it seriously enough because it's a reason to do the homework. It's a reason to dig into the causes.
Ruvain, I'll ask you this the following way. When you're looking to pick up players off the waiver wire and you're in the system, you're in, whatever platform you're using, well, they're not showing projections in there. They're showing year-to-date figures. And very often, I do this too. You're looking at, all right, what has this player done year-to-date? What has this player done the last 14 days, 28 days, whatever your time horizon is? And, all right, let's bubble up to the top who's hit a lot of homers. Let's bubble up to the top who's had a lot of runs or at-bats. We're sort of doing that. How do you blend, looking at the year-to-date figures with the fact that, we know that some of it is a fluke and we want to base more on some of our preseason projections, right? But those figures are not easily downloadable in your drafting software to connect with the free agents available. How do you blend the two to know how to pick up on the waiver wire?
Well, first of all, you're looking at the player and you're looking at the pedigree of the player, whether they've done this before. If they've never done this before, like I'm talking about Patrick Wisdom or talking like a Yandy Diaz, I know he's not available, but a Yandy Diaz type who's never done what he's done, showed the power that he has, like a Luke Raley, who just never showed this power before, and he's still available in some of my 10-team leagues. I'm in one 10-team league. He's still available on the waiver wire. Do I really want to go after him, or has the league made an adjustment for him? Because usually you'll see that adjustment made around this time. Around the league, everyone will have a notebook on players. They'll have enough statistical data to be able to create a counter attack for these players, so they know how to go about attacking the player, where they have their holes, where they have holes in the swing, what are they going to do about it. So I think usually toward the end of May, we'll see how the teams start correcting for these anomalies in the projections, if you want to call them that, and then you can have a better idea whether or not they'll do well. But as for searching the waiver wire, usually you can actually, if I'm looking at the season, I'm going to look also at the last 2 weeks for hitters. I'm going to look at the last 3 starts for a pitcher. If you see a trend that's different than what their overall stats show, then I think you should take that into consideration.
Yeah, I really wish on Fangraphs they would allow us to import our leagues, and you can see what free agents are available, so you can overlay, what you currently think about a player versus what the projections say versus year to date, and everything in nice, neat bow with all the advanced stats. Glenn, how do you do it? How do you comb through the waiver wire and take what you've done preseason and take what you see year to date?
So I actually do it very manually, which is my way of doing things. And if you've seen me at the draft or auction table, it's paper, pen, a couple of colored pens, things of that nature. I go league by league. I don't try to lay the leagues together because every league is a little bit different in its rules or its strategies, or the makeup of my team is different. And I sort by the various production that they've had so far. And I also just use the eye test. Why is this guy here? You know what I mean? Why is this guy on the wire? And I then pick the free agents in that league that I want to do a deeper dive into. And it's worked pretty well for me. I've managed to identify the players I really want to chase and don't want to chase in each league. And it really is a function of, making sure you look at most of the valuable free agents to make a decision. Do I want to chase this guy?
Yeah, I do a lot of manual stuff too. I'm not exactly a paper and pen guy, but yeah, you're dealing with your individual leagues, and you got to make decisions that are dependent, for your specific team situation. And I do use the year-to-date numbers to bubble up. I like using percent owned. That's a great way to bubble up players that, why is this guy available? He is owned in a lot of leagues. And I try to look up the various ownership percentages of that player across different platforms, Yahoo, CBS, NFBC. That says a lot also. And then I'll do the deep dives as well. All right, next question, Glenn. Is it too early to take a victory lap? So, for example, if you said, wow, I really gotta... I thought that Yandy Diaz was going to be amazing, and I was right. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Is it too early to take a victory? Now, obviously, you want to be a modest person. You don't want to go around and say, I got this right. But, internally, can you take a victory lap and say, got it?
Oh, yeah, I'm pat myself on the back all the time. Wow, look how smart I am. But the reality is, fine, you had your fun, you patted yourself on the back, and then you realize it's still only less than 25% or whatever of the season, and, it's too early for a victory lap. You get a month from now, and especially the players you picked up in the 25th round or for $3, you've already got a profit. Then go ahead and take the victory lap.
Yeah, I mean, not to take the victory lap on Yandy Diaz, but ATC did project Yandy Diaz as the best value compared to market, and obviously didn't project that he was going to be this good, just that he would be a profitable buy, right? But I do think, though, that in terms of rest of season, like even if he goes back to his old ways for the rest of the season, you've still banked your profit, right? There's no way that your $2 Yandy Diaz did not actually do good for you. Like it's banked in there. So because of that, I think it's okay to basically say, all right, this guy was definitely the right thing. Now, pitching might be different, though, because pitching, let's take a guy like Pablo Lopez. Pablo Lopez has been absolutely enormous, and if you thought that he was the guy to take, kudos to you. But if he stinks the rest of the year, he could do damage to your ratios, whereas Yandy Diaz, it does damage to your batting average. Yandy Diaz is a good batting average player, so it's probably not even going to happen, even if he goes back to his old home run ways. But pitching could be a little bit different. Do you think there's a difference, pitchers versus hitters, in terms of declaring a victory lap? Well, this guy is good, and I'm sure he'll be great the rest of the season for your team?
Oh, definitely. I mean, pitchers have the blow-ups, and this year, the blow-ups have been really dramatic. Even pitchers I like have had these giant blow-ups. I mean, Braxton Garrett, I'm still a believer, but that blow-up was disastrous. So you get a Pablo Lopez, and I like Pablo Lopez. I'm worried about his health, and I would defer to Ruvain on that. But if he goes out in his next start and goes 3 innings, 9 runs, 4 walks, all of your profit has just gone away, which is the difference between pitchers and hitters.
Right. Ruvain, your take, and what do you think of Pablo Lopez's health?
Okay, Pablo Lopez, I'm not overly concerned about. I think his health will be managed throughout the course of the year. He did it last year, and I know he has a very short track record of managing it. But he's with a different organization. Maybe the Twins manage it differently than the Marlins do. As for taking victory laps, no victory laps now. You drafted your team and you picked the players on your team based on the projections for an entire season. You can take the victory lap, let's say maybe end of August, beginning of September, saying, okay, I got this guy and he lasted and he did exactly what he was supposed to do throughout the whole season. If you do it if you're saying it too soon, do you believe in jinxes? Are you gonna jinx the player? Is he gonna go back to normal? There are many different things that can trigger, and I think you can take a victory lap after it's been at least 5 months into the season, like let's say toward the end of August, beginning September, because that's when you can see whether or not your projections or whether or not how you evaluated them preseason actually panned out.
All right, before we go any further, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So the next subject we're going to be talking about is what should we do with struggling stars? Is it too early to count them out? So my trivia for this week is this. There are 4 players. Wait, let me count again. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, there are 5 players who have WRC plus below 75 and have over 145 plate appearances, which means they're getting regular at-bats. They should be in most people's lineups, but there are 4 players that have a WRC plus below 75. 100 is average. Glenn, can you name these 5 players?
Oh my goodness, no! I'm sure I can't.
No, I'm sure you can. Just think of the players who are underperforming to an extent, and you'll get them.
Can I guess Ahmed Rosario?
Ahmed Rosario is not on there. You have to have 145 plate appearances. I tried to get a threshold to show that they're being put out there day after day after day.
Huh. Day after day.
Oh, Jose Abreu.
Jose Abreu has the lowest WRC plus. He's at 46. He's number 1 on the list of players. Can you name any others?
I'm trying to think of the guys on my teams that might have done that, but I'm not sure I have those. Gunnar Henderson?
No, no. He hasn't had enough at bats yet.
How about the Mets? Starling Marte, he's been terrible.
But not that terrible. Not that terrible.
Okay.
Ryan McMahon, he's at
Really?
62.
Okay.
Elvis Andrews is at 54. Heimer Candelario, who's not a star, is 65.
That was the one I was just about to guess. Oh.
But Nolan Arenado is at 72. So, Glenn, what do we do with these players? Are you sitting Jose Abreu, Nolan Arenado? Are you playing them? Are you trying to trade them? What are you doing with these guys?
So I'm playing Arenado. I just think the entirety of the Cardinals team is in a giant funk, and I think they are going to come out of it. I think they're too good. I also think they're going to trade for a pitcher, and that's going to change the team around a little bit. So I'm playing Arenado. Plus, they're not taking him out of the lineup. They're not taking that glove out of the lineup, so he's going to get to work through it. Jose Abreu, this is not new. Arenado was great last year. Abreu was not. So this is now the second year, or at least, maybe a whole calendar year of bad play from Abreu, from an older player, and they have options there. So I am very tempted to sit Abreu at least until, I see some signs of life. Heimer Candelario, he's never done it. I was a believer this year, I have to admit, but now he's got some injury issues on a bad offensive team. He's certainly a guy that you can sit. Elvis Andrus, the whole White Sox team is bad. And by the way, I think Lennon Sosa has been worse than Andrus. Maybe Moncada comes back. I think Alberto's going to play second, and you might see Andrus sit. So I think you can sit Andrus as well. There might have been another name I missed in that group.
Ryan McMahon. Or even a Juan Soto who's underperforming. He's getting on base. So if you're in OBP league, that's fine. But he's not performing to first round status, second round status. You're not getting what you paid for.
Well, but Soto's been pretty good in the last let's say week or so.
Yeah, he's
right?
Soto's starting to come around.
He's got
slowly.
an OPS over 1,000 in the last week and over 1,200 in the last 2 weeks. So I think Juan Soto's back. The others, I'm with you.
Do you think, Glenn, it's the argument of, I spent so much draft capital on somebody, so, I spent a top 8 round pick for a player. It's just too early to give up on them. Like, do you see it as a line of above this line, meaning above this draft capital that you've spent is just gotta let it go? Is there some line for you that does it? Obviously, it's player by player specific situation, but do you have that in mind as I spent so much on him, I gotta let it turn around?
I do, but it's not because I took Juan Soto in the first round. It's because I had a reason to take Juan Soto in the first round, and so his age, his ability, the team context, none of that's changed, and so I think it's because I really believed 6 weeks ago. I still believe today. I think you get down to guys that you didn't take till the 10th round or the 11th round, or they were single-digit auction buys, then I think, you didn't believe that much before, so it's a little easier to cut bait.
So if you have a guy like Josh Bell, who in a mixed league, let's say, I don't think you're cutting him in a mono league, but
we have him in Tout Wars, AL, so I hear you.
Yeah, I've got him in Tout Wars mixed, 12 team head to head, but spent $10 on him, let's say, which is not ridiculous amount, but it's not $2. Is that something that you think it's too early, or is the $10 threshold? Or how about a guy like Tyler O'Neill? Tyler O'Neill, I spent $16 on in 1 or 2 leagues. Ooh, now he's injured, so if I have an IL spot, then I have him there. But is it too early to cut bait on some of these guys?
So I think it's too early for Josh Bell, right? This is a guy who's still getting on base, right? You take a look, and if I would have told you, all right, do you want a guy who's got a 15% walk rate and a 19% K rate and getting on base at almost a 340 clip, you'd say, all right, I'm pretty interested, right, in that player, and a guy whose hard hit rate's around 40%, so that's, pretty decent. It's not phenomenal, but it's pretty decent. A max EV over 110, you'd say, I think there's still room for him. As for Tyler O'Neill, I see him getting traded, so I'm holding him to wait till he gets traded for a pitcher.
Yeah, he's a head case thing. What about the injury situation? Like I'm sorry, it's one of your Yankees, but Carlos Rodon, who knows if he's gonna come back? If you have an IL slot in your league, sure, that's not an issue. But if you're like in an NFBC setting or an ESPN where you have very limited IL, is it time to cut bait on Carlos Rodon and say, you know what, it probably ain't gonna happen. Let's just cut bait on him.
So I think the answer is in a league like the NFBC main event, or where you can really only afford one player like that, and maybe you have Stanton or Altuve or Woodruff or whatever, you can't have two like that. And, I have no shares at all of Rodon, which is not a surprise because Rick and I play by the rule of don't pay full value for big money free agent in first year, which Carlos Rodon is. And the Yankees are going to be thinking about this differently. They'll be happy if he's healthy on September 1st. Whereas if you're the Royals, you need him pitching today. So that counsels against him giving you a lot of roto value because the Yankees are only motivated to get him ready for the last, 4 to 6 weeks of the season at this point, in my opinion.
Now, great points there. Ruvain, is it too early to count out struggling stars? I mean, you mentioned Juan Soto, who's turning it around now. How about a guy also like Corbin Burns, who just looks a little bit off this year? Is it too early to count on him as being an ace?
Yeah, I think it's too early to count him out. It's for pitchers. It does take a little bit longer to get going. I'd even throw in Max Scherzer there because how reliable has he been over his last few starts? He's been hurt. He may be having the same thing that Carlos Rodon. How the Mets manage him, not the same injury, but how the Mets manage him. They want to make sure that he gets to the finish line in order to help you. In those leagues. You have to play them. I mean, what other options are you going to do? You're going to get a pitcher off the waiver and throw him in there. I'd rather you spent this the big money on these guys like a Corbin Burns or a Max Scherzer. If you don't play them, you should. I think you should just live and die by them. I mean, that's what you got them. That's what you built your team around. If you're going to stop it and flip the script, I mean, that's going to be a very hard thing to do in mid-season.
Yeah, Glenn, do you think there's a difference between hitter and pitcher in terms of struggling stars bouncing back?
Only if you can identify things that tell you it looks like an injury. A pitcher who's typically, average velocity 96 and he's throwing 92. There's something wrong there. All of a sudden you see a pitcher who has abandoned a critical pitch and you think they must, then I think you can see things that are going on. But generally, I think it's too early to abandon anyone you believed in just 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say about this whole general topic of either struggling stars bouncing back or cutting bait on players is not only is it a case-by-case player by the player, it really depends on your team situation. And I know it's early now, but generally speaking, if your team is in last place or towards the bottom, you need more than just some expected stats. Like you can't just bank on some expected stats of players. You need some upside. So having a Carlos Rodon, even if he comes back for the last 2 months of the season, your team might need it. Like you may not be able to win without that. And to cut bait on that for some number 7 starter on your team, you probably need more than just that. Like the volume alone and just the expected production alone is probably not going to do it. But if you're at the top, if you're in second place, let's say, you need that expected production. You can't sit and wait for a pitcher to come back or not come back, and who knows how it'll be. You're not looking at the upside. You're looking at the 50th percentile. You're looking at, I need to bank stats. I just need the at-bats. I need the innings. I need the Ks. So I think it really matters where you are in the standings as far as how you manage some of these cuts or benching of players, things like that.
But wouldn't it also matter what league you're in? If you're in a league that has a playoffs and you want to hold on to these guys just in case they do come back and you can use them in the playoffs, that's another consideration.
Oh, for sure. If you're in if you're in a playoff league, you're probably keeping Carlos Rodon just in case he comes back in September. You can use him. I would definitely hold on to him for at least another month till you get more of a expected return date, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, especially in a head-to-head league, no question.
All right, now it's time for some waiver wire picks. That's where we tell you, the listener, a couple of players that we're thinking about picking up this week in Fab. All right, let's start with you, Glenn, who is a player or two that you might consider this week.
I'm going to go to the bullpen here, and I know everyone is all excited for Liam Hendricks to come back, and I think it's so phenomenal that he's healthy and pitching, but, they're not going to pitch him 3 nights in a row all the time, even when he does come back, and there's a guy in that bullpen, which is really underperformed, that has looked nasty, and that's coming out of nowhere. Kanon Middleton, 21% swinging strike rate, 15 K per 9, and he's throwing 2 really nasty pitches, a 28 swinging strike rate on the change, 20 on the slider. You could really steal some good strikeouts, get some saves, maybe some vultured wins, and he's not going to cost almost anything.
Yeah, swinging strike rate of 21%. He'll probably take over some save ops in the short term. Reynaldo Lopez has looked so bad. He was terrible today also. He's been terrible. All right, Ruvain, how about you? Who's a player or so that you like to pick up?
I actually got 3 outfielders that I'm looking at right now because you can never have enough outfielders. Christopher Morel from the Cubs. He's only owned in 35% of CBS leagues. He's hitting so far with the playing time he's got. Last year, he had 16 home runs with 10 stolen bases, and he was caught 7 times, which means he ran a lot. So that's something, if you need stolen bases, he's the guy to get. And AAA so far this year, he was batting .330 with 11 homers and 4 stolen bases. The only person blocking him right now, either at DH or in the outfield, Eric Hosmer's clogging up the DH right now. I don't know how much longer that's going to be. That's why they called up Matt Mervis, and they're putting him there. But Morel is eligible at second and in the outfield. So if he's available, you need some stolen bases, you need some short-term power, he's a guy you can definitely look at. Another guy to look at who has power, who just came back off the injured list and may be available in a lot of leagues. He's only owned in 21% of CBS leagues, and that's Randall Grichuk. He homered against the Mets, well, seems like everyone did, but he's had hits in every game he's played so far. He has a 9-game hitting streak coming off of the injury. He looks good. He plays in Colorado. He's going to play almost every day out there in Colorado. If you need a good source of power there, that's perfect. And another guy for speed, if you want him, is Leody Taveras. He's batting .417 over the last week with 4 RBIs and a stolen base. He's known for his speed. He's only owned in 9% of CBS leagues, so he's available. So we mentioned before, you don't have to punch stolen bases. I just mentioned 2 guys who can give you stolen bases. You don't have to punt homers. You got a guy there with homers with Grichuk as well.
Yeah, I have Grichuk on almost every team. I actually drafted him in most teams, knowing that he would coming back soon, and got him for like $1 in a lot of deep leagues. So there you go. Christopher Morel, it's interesting with Cubs calling up Mervis. It means that I think they mean business. They see some struggling Cardinals. They want to make a run, maybe the fan base. And he's been great. He's 4 for 8 since he's called up. He's got that power speed combo. He's not owned in a lot of leagues. He's only owned in 40% of CBS leagues. It's got to mean that Hosmer's out of there. Hosmer's WRC plus is 74. I would imagine that Christopher Morel's WRC plus is going to be more than 74. So we're talking days before Hosmer's DFA'd. They pay literally the minimum league salary. So, any other to add, Glenn?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of other relievers. We talked about always trying to chase down these saves. The Yankee bullpen, Clay Holmes, it's not pretty when he comes in and you're biting your nails, just worried about it. And Ian Hamilton has quietly been really good. He's raised his velocity from 94 to 96 miles an hour, 16% almost swing strike rate, plus a 60% ground ball rate. You keep the ball, you're getting people to swing and miss, and you're keeping the ball on the ground in Yankee Stadium. That's a prescription for success. And, another bullpen that's been really bad is the Cubs bullpen. And don't look now, but Mark Leiter's got a 16% swing strike rate, and he's keeping the ball on the ground. He's getting some save opportunities. So I like both those players plus Middleton. Very, very cheap. Might steal you some saves. Worth doing.
Yeah, I was going to mention Mark Leiter. He's got 25 Ks in 16 innings, .94 whip, only 20% owned, and the Cubs can't figure out who it is, and this guy looks like he has the best skills. So there you go. I'm surprised you didn't mention Michael King. Is that because you think he's over-owned right now?
I think it's because I don't think they're going to give him the opportunity to close. First, it's two reasons. Number one is they're being very careful with him. He rarely pitches back-to-back games. And second, I think they like him in the the 5 out, 6 out situation. So I just don't think they're going to want to move him to the closer role. I think if he pitches a great 8th inning and has some bullets left in the arm for the 9th, they may leave him in, steal a save that way. But I don't think they look at him as a closer.
I would argue that makes him more valuable. Like he's basically the Chad Green of this year, and that's super valuable in roto leagues. In 15-team mixed or deeper, you're getting great ratios and great strikeouts. I mean, you might get 6-7 strikeouts a week. That's probably better than starters. That at the bottom for you. So I like him even if he doesn't get saves, and he'll probably get one here and there.
Look, I can't argue with that logic. That makes sense. I'm just I have a lot of leagues where there were so few lockdown closers, and the draft capital it took to get Clase or Romano or Hader was so great that I have a lot of teams where I'm just looking to steal saves wherever I can.
Yep. How about Yennier Cano, who's only 40% owned?
Oh, love it.
Yeah, he's got a .16 whip. No, that's not a 1.6 whip. .16. He's 3 hits in his first 18 and 2/3 innings. Here's an interesting thing I saw the other day. He has 14 appearances. It is the lowest whip for any 14 appearance stretch of any pitcher, period, in the entire modern baseball area, like maybe the last 80 years or so. The lowest whip of any 14 appearance stretch, and that's the first 14 appearances this season. He's just enormous. And if you saw these hits that he had, those are not even hits. These are like 2 of them were infield hits. Like just silly stuff. And by the way, he's got 3 saves so far. He can vulture wins. I have him in a couple of leagues. We own him, Ruven. We own him in NFBC league where we also have Batista. So It's insurance, if anything else. And I like these middle. I mean, the ratios you're getting is just enormous from these guys.
Yeah, he's been just phenomenal, and like you said, if Batista pitches too many innings, he comes in and he gets the save. So if you have Batista, he actually makes it more valuable for you to have him on your roster.
Brings back memories of Greg Olson and Mark Williamson in the old days for the O's.
There you go. I'll mention one other guy, J.J. Bleday. He's back up. New team, new scenery. He looks great. 3 homers. 8-game hitting streak since he's back. He's batting .379. Maybe the A's have worked on his swing or whatever it is. The results are there. High prospect, really didn't do great last year. He has a chance of being the, dare I say, the most valuable player in fantasy on the Athletics. I don't think it's a huge stretch, actually, to think that.
I think it's Ruiz and his 20 steals or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm with you on Bleday, and you know what it is? You've got a strikeout rate that was 28%, last year, and is now 16%. That's the difference.
Yeah, no, totally. It's just night and day for him. I mean, he's got a 237 WRC plus, but yeah, the walks are there. The strikeout rate is just down. That's what you want to see. So I think that the change of scenery did something, and that often happens with players. All right, let's do the pitcher preview. That's pitchers who we're thinking about picking up for this week. Could be a 2-star pitcher, a good 1-start matchup, something to help us out short term. Glenn, you go first. Who's the pitcher that you're interested in?
So I'm going to go a little scandalous here. And I'm going to say Lance Lynn, as bad as he has been, as bad as he's been, gets Cleveland and Kansas City. So you get 2 solid matchups. But you take a look at the numbers. The 7.5 ERA is gross, but the 3.85 xFIP is not gross. And you got his CSW, his called strike plus whiffs, is actually better than last year. His swinging strike rate is still solid. His velo is still there. I think he's gotten dramatically unlucky and doesn't look like a pitcher who's lost it. So I'm willing to roll the dice in a deep league with those 2 matchups.
Yeah, it's got to be a home run problem. And anytime his FIP, by the way, is 5.3. Anytime you see, for you listeners out there, anytime you see a FIP, which is 2 runs over the xFIP, it means that it's a home run problem. Because what xFIP, the difference between xFIP and FIP, xFIP assumes a league average home run rate instead of whatever your pitchers are. So his home run to fly ball rate is 22.4. The league average is closer to, let's say, 15. So, yes, so it's probably a home run problem. Will it persist? I don't know. His BABIP is also out of whack. So, yeah, he's obviously been pretty unlucky. But, yeah, maybe that's how he rights his ship. He looked great in the World Baseball Classic this year. So, maybe that was just some unluckiness and take a chance. All right, Ruvain, how about you?
I got two pitchers. One is a two-star pitcher if you want to take that risk. Matt Stram, 31% owned in CBS. In his last three starts, 21 strikeouts and 14 innings. He does have a 4.5 ERA in those starts, but he's at San Francisco and home against the Cubs. Those are two good, decent starts. Now, it is possible there is an outside chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen. There's an outside chance that Ranger Suarez gets called up and Stram goes back to the bullpen. But if Stram is able to start, I think those are two pretty good matchups. Another guy I want to mention who's only 20% owned in CBS, Dane Dunning. He took the rotation spot of Jacob deGrom. He's made two starts so far this year, 11 innings, 8 strikeouts, an ERA of 1.64 and .91. So that's pretty good. The Rangers have been good. They're in first place, which is very surprising. One of the more surprising teams in the league, and he's been doing pretty well. So they're not certain when he's going to start next, but if he does start, he's a guy to look for.
Yeah, and Dane Dunning, great for points leagues because he's a spar. He's a starting pitcher as a reliever. You can put him in as a relief pitcher there. I'm going to go with JP France, 30% owned, pitches on a good team. And he's filling in for the injured and Tommy John Luis Garcia. First start against Seattle was a good one. He's playing Chicago Cubs this week, so good matchup. 34% strikeout rate in the minors last year. So there's a guy with stuff. He does have a high walk rate, so it's a guy who just has stuff and needs to throw strikes. Let's see what happens. Very similar to, I think, Hunter Brown in the same team. So let's see what happens. If you're in a deep league, I would definitely take a chance. Maybe even a 12-team league if you think it's a good matchup and you have a spot. And I think Minnesota's doing a really great job with pitchers. Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober, and Louis Varland. I think that those are two interesting names. Louis Varland, still 35%. We mentioned him last week. He's playing at the Angels this week. 20 strikeouts in 16 innings, 14% swinging strike rate, and he's been very unlucky with an 86% strand rate. You can ignore that. I think that Varland is very interesting for deep leagues. And Bailey Ober, I think, has shown that he can get things done. So I like them. Minnesota's a good team so far. I would pick up the pair of Twins if they're available in your league. Anyone else? Anyone?
I kind of still like Peyton Battenfield. I mean, he's going up at Chicago. Typically, the White Sox park is not a great park to pitch in, but the White Sox are not hitting. Battenfield's a guy who has 3 pitches with a 12 or more swinging strike rate, which is really nice. And the cutters is at 18.5. And he's keeping the ball on the ground at 48%. So the tools are all there for him to succeed.
Yeah, and he's to start the following week. He gets the White Sox this week, and then the White Sox again. And another team that like what the pitchers are doing, the Guardian. I almost said Indians. The Guardians. You got Logan Allen. You got Bybee. Bieber looks good this year. I don't know how long that'll last, but he looks good. Quantrill looks good. I like what the Guardians have been doing. So yeah, Peyton Battenfield could be interesting as well. All right, Ruvain. Injury update time. Let's see what's happening this week.
Well, we'll start with a couple players we mentioned already, and that's Tyler O'Neill. He was placed on the IL with lower back strains, but Cardinals manager Oliver Marmol already said that he may begin a rehab assignment next Tuesday, so this coming week. So he may be back by the end of next week, which is possible. But what was very interesting to me is that who did the Cardinals call up when he got injured? It wasn't Jordan Walker, it was Juan Yepez. So if you want to take a waiver wire on Juan Yepez, and if he starts hitting when O'Neill comes back, they may keep him up. He may have a good outfield possibility there. Jose Alvarado, who's placed on the IL with left elbow inflammation. The MRI showed no structural damage. He's going to be shut down for a couple days. Phillies said they're going to quote-unquote take it slow. So like Glenn mentioned, Craig Kimbrell is a good possibility, but don't forget about Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto. They both have histories closing, and they both can do it as well. Max Fried and Kyle Wright. Poor Atlanta Braves. They're in first place, and they can't keep anyone healthy. Kyle Wright, he was placed on the IL with a right shoulder inflammation for the second time this year. He himself said he's going to be out for at least 2 months. So if you've spent a lot of money on him, I think he may be a guy you can possibly drop just because 2 months from now, you're looking at what, end of July, beginning of August, and you don't even know what you're getting back because shoulder injuries are very fickle, so you never know what's going to happen with that. And Max Fried, a strained left forearm, he's being shut down, and he's also going to miss an extended period of time, possibly almost 2 months as well. I wouldn't go dropping him because Max Fried has a better track record. But people to keep in mind, Jared Schuster was called up, and Mike Soroka, I mentioned him last week in the waiver wire portion of the show. Mike Soroka, they're keeping him down. They didn't call him up yet. They want to get a few more innings under his belt before they call him up. They weren't expecting to call him up this soon, but they are thinking about it, and because of the injuries, he may come up sooner than later. Eloy Jimenez, appendicitis, poor baby. He had his appendix taken out and got some ice cream, and now he gets to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Billy Hamilton was called up, and he went on the IL. So now they have Jake Marisnick helping out in the outfield. That's how bad that outfield depth is getting right there. Let me end on some positive notes here. Corey Seager, he has been on the IL since early April, but manager Bruce Bochy said that Seager is expected to return early during the Rangers' next homestand, which is next week. He began playing rehab assignments actually today. And Liam Hendricks, he is currently on his rehab assignment. He could be activated next week. That doesn't mean you should start him next week. I don't think they're going to throw him right into the closer role, but it is possible that in 2 weeks from now, he will be the closer for the White Sox.
You know what? I think they might just throw him into the closer role. He looks like he wants it right away, and I don't know. The closer so far hasn't been great. By the way, I wasn't laughing at the injury. I was laughing at the ice cream line that you mentioned.
Well, listen, Eloy Jimenez has all these weird injuries. He got hurt trying to climb a fence in spring training. He gets all these freak injuries. Sometimes, if you don't cry about it, you have to laugh about it. So I'm not making fun of it either. I'm just saying that, listen, my son had his appendix removed, so I know what it's like going through it. I know what it's like having a sibling, a child going through it. So I understand that, but it's a matter of the fact that the White Sox, they just can't seem to catch a break.
Well, that's the end of our show here. I want to thank Glenn Colton for coming on the show. Glenn, what's going on with you these days? Why don't you tell us where we can see all your stuff? And, of course, the Sirius XM Colton and the Wolfman show, Tuesday nights. Definitely you should listen. That's I put it on every time as I'm driving back and forth from softball or pickleball, whatever I have that night.
All right. Well, definitely. Thank you for listening. We got to get you on the show again sometime soon. It is on Sirius XM at XM87, Tuesday nights 10 to midnight Eastern, 7 o'clock out on the West Coast. And I'm also on Twitter at GlennColton1. Not writing right this minute over at Fantasy Alarm, but I imagine that I'll be making my return in the not-too-distant future.
Sounds good. Ruvain, how about your stuff?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out all these injury updates and more, Next Man Up, everything like that. I also have an article every weekend coming out on Rotoballer discussing all these injuries more in depth, who's the next man up, and what to expect.
And I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my work over at Fangraphs, over at Rotoballer. The ATCNY is my Twitter handle. ATC projections now are rest of season. We finally have that. Check them out at Fangraphs. That's the only place right now it is on. So check that out. And, of course, you can listen to us every week right here on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. It's been a blast. Thank you so much once again to Glenn Colton for coming on the show. We'll be back next week. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.